what I keep circling back to, this narrative, the storyline that I'm seeing is an inflection point that we're seeing as a country. Something that, we hear it all the time. We're in uncharted territory, and we really are. And so I'm going to try and stay financially focused, but it is going to start from a political perspective, and maybe even greater than that, maybe even zoom out a little bit further. And well, there's a balance to this world, and I think that's undeniable. It seems to be a fact of life. And there's a poetry. And one of the things that I'm experiencing is I do believe we're going through a secondary American Revolution. Um, Hopefully, it's not going to be bloody. Hopefully, it's not going to be one with bullets, but it certainly seems to be a financial one. So, I guess my first claim that I'll make to you and to our audience is that I think the most historic and chaotic events are still out in front of us. And that's kind of a crazy notion on its own,
That's
because we've
saying a
been
lot.
through so much.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, just going back the last 4 or 5 years and the news cycles and the political stuff, I still think that the apex is out in front of us. We are still in the overture. The crescendo has not even begun yet. Um, and my opinion has really changed in the last 2 months. Right. I'm going to try and keep my personal opinions out of this, but I've been a conservative leaning person for my adult life. But I've been very reserved looking at what's been happening politically over the last 4 years. I've been leaning in one direction, but I have this internal dialogue that keeps dialing me back. And all of that's the chains have been broken free. What happened as soon as Inauguration Day and how this administration hit the ground running and what's been brought to light so far, it's just blown my mind. And that's what I really want to talk about today, and try and make sense of that and try and read the tea leaves moving forward. So again, I guess I'll just keep rolling with this, but I have a new opinion and new financial goals accordingly. I think all of us are interested in growing our wealth, obviously. My goal for the next 2 years is not to lose it. And that has just shifted recently. And I'm very, very concerned. And I think a lot of the stats that we're going to cover today are going to bolster my concerns. But my goal right now is to not lose my ass over the next 2 years. That's basically it. A grander narrative that I'm seeing, I guess I'll start with DOGE. And for anyone who's had their head in the sand over the last 2 months, DOGE is being headed by the richest man that's ever existed, Elon Musk. A lot of people call him smart. I think he is smart, obviously, but he describes himself as trying to be less stupid. And a lot of people might think of that as splitting hairs, but there's an important distinction between that. And it's one of humility, right? Because he understands that he's just a human being, and he's just trying to be less dumb, make less mistakes. And I think that's sorely needed in our world. It's remarkable that someone who's so successful has that point of view, has that very meek and humble point of view. But anyways, he's leading the DOGE team, which is apparently a bunch of young 20 teenagers, whiz kids, who just have the algorithms and the wherewithal to go through our financial government and expose the corruption. And this is what's really been blowing my mind. Leviathan. There's a political commentator, Brett Weinstein, who calls our federal government Leviathan. And I think that is poetically accurate, because it is a sum. The sum of our federal government is greater than the sum of its parts, excuse me. And previous attempts to bring it down have only been counterproductive, right? There's been agencies created before for financial responsibility, and they've just become part of the system. And so we have this great big monster that is our federal spending, and DOGE is attacking it. And I think that this battle that I'm going to do my best to explain and articulate is what's going to result into the financial fallout that we're going to experience in the next couple of years, which is, again, why my goal is to simply not lose my ass. Excuse my language, but I think we have an adult audience here, right?
I think so too. And to add to your point about agencies created to cut back. I personally have been on a few boards of different nonprofits, and anytime there's like, okay, well, let's look at that issue. Maybe there's something we need to do there. There's always a committee they come up with a committee to, instead of the people in the room that actually are the ones that there's always another committee. And I think to your earlier point, that's what's happened with the government is that what happens is they go, you know what, we're spending too much in a certain area. Let's create a committee, and that committee costs money. Instead of just making the cuts, the necessary cuts, there's a committee, and the committee takes time, and nothing good happens in committee. So, anyways, I was going to add to your earlier point, but go on.
And by the time that happens, the issue at hand may be stagnant, and it's constantly intertwining itself further and further into the system. And look, it's not like I ever had a better plan, right? These are difficult things. Audits are very hard to complete, and that's what's so exciting about what DOGE is doing. So what's happened so far is we've just like scraped off some of the callous skin of this Leviathan. Right? Nothing major's happened. I mean, well, we're going to get into USAID here in just a moment, and that is a big deal, but it's really small beans from where I see this thing going. So Leviathan is kind of aware of this. I've deemed it the patriotic presence, right? But it's still just kind of a fly on the side. The next step is to kind of shift the Leviathan. And then the step after that is to corner it. And once it is cornered, that's when things are going to get crazy. That's when we are going to have the black swan of black swans. And I don't know what it's going to look like. And again, it could be a combination of all sorts of ugly things, but I think a financial fallout is inevitable. I don't think we can avoid that. And I'll get into that in just a minute here. So, USAID. Before this came out, again, my opinion has changed pretty dramatically in the last 2 months. Before this came out, it was pretty easy for me to assume that there was some waste, some fraud, some corruption built within the government, right? That is just a given for any government. And in my own internal dialogue, I had that at, 30, 40%. And I thought that was rather robust. I thought that was a pretty big number. I thought I was being pretty skeptical. Well, as soon as the USAID curtain was pulled back, that 30, 40% that's not even close. It looks like an 80 to 90%. And that amount of waste, it cannot simply be summed up to incompetence. Incompetence does not capture it. There has to be an element of corruption. And how much of that is pure corruption? We're going to find out. We're along for the ride. You don't know. I don't know. We all have our assumptions, and I think it's a rather large number that we're going to find out. But we're seeing this play out in front of us. So, and I think a major part of that is obviously going to be kickbacks. And we've heard the president refer to that pretty recently, saying that, how is it not a kickback? And I have that exact sentiment. I can't prove it to you. I don't have the, a stat line to bring that up and say this much went to kickbacks. We don't know that yet. But anyone who's paying attention, anyone who just who keeps their head up above the water line and is looking around, that's an obvious conclusion. So fortunately, I'm not going to go into the details of what the spending was on. You can find that all over the internet. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. And I'm so glad it's basically been dissolved. It's basically been put back under the State Department. And thank goodness for that, because now it has some legitimate oversight. It was basically acting as its own entity with no oversight, which was just not a good thing. And again, it was a big deal. And it is still a big deal, and it's still playing out. But to give it to some perspective, we're talking about less than 1% of the federal spending. USAID is just a blip on the screen. And DOGE is going to go into the Department of Education, back to this Leviathan, and trying to paint this bigger picture of what's going on. Is my next claim is, I think everyone would agree with it, is that if you agree that the Leviathan exists, that this is a sum, it's bigger than the sum of its parts, it's not going to go quietly, right? It is going to be a big ugly fight down to the dirty end. And I'm really enjoying our new White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt. I'm sorry for butchering her name, but um, I'm a big fan of hers. She seems to be a big upgrade. And she said explicitly in one of the first days on the job is that this administration is going to go line by line through the entire federal budget. And I believe them. I mean, that is an insane task just to state on their own, right? To say it out loud that they're going to go through the entire federal budget line by line, that alone should take years. Now, fortunately, they have algorithms and they have this DOGE team, and they just know how to use computers in a way that we never will. But I do believe them. I think they're going to be able to find so much fraud, so much waste, so much corruption that it's going to have a financial fallout. There is, again, I don't see any other result other than that. And so I've been asking myself and my clients this basic, hypothetical question, and it's: do you believe that there is more corruption in the federal government? Well, yeah, of course. Do you believe it's going to be exposed? Do you think DOGE is going to be able to do what they say they're going to do? And so far, I have no reason to doubt them. So far, my answer is absolutely yes. I think they are going to be successful in their endeavors. Well, if you believe those two presuppositions, then you're also believing to the third one, which is that our entire financial system is about to be uprooted. You can't have one without the other. If you're going to go into the world's finances, right? Because we're the United States, we're at the epicenter of the entire financial everything. And if we're going to go into that and everything's going to be shifted and uprooted and reworked, well, that is going to have dramatic financial impact through everything. Those dollars that are going to be discovered to be wasteful or fraudulent or of corrupt nature, or even just ideological spending that is no longer on this administration's table, all of that's being pulled out. Now, I think it's going to be repurposed. I think all of this is a net good. I think we are going to flourish as a nation for several decades to come. But that's going to come with the preceding couple years, which I think is the next couple years right in front of us. I think we're on the doorstep of it. And that is going to be there's no avoiding the chaos. There's no avoiding the financial fallout that's going to result from everything just being unplugged, pulled out. So uprooted is the word I keep using. And I believe that what's been done in the dark is going to be brought to light. And I know this is starting to sound bad and it sounds big, but it's not a doom and gloom statement. It really isn't. It's an optimistic statement. I think it's what's needed. It's the story of the Phoenix. Well, when you have all this waste, and whether you're viewing this personally or as the Leviathan, when you have all this excess, it needs to burn off. And that burning off is a painful experience, and there's no avoiding it. And from that, we get the Phoenix metaphor. We will rise from the ashes. Again, I'm a patriot. I'm optimistic. I think we're going to make it past this point. I think the hardest part is behind us, but I think the most dramatic events are in front of us.
Another question we have on YouTube is, what if Trump actually gives everybody $5,000? Do you think that would be a good thing or a bad thing for us?
So I see. Isn't it inflationary? Well,
Yeah.
if he's, I think there's an extra layer. I think our audience member there made an A to B correlation, and I think there's an extra step in there. And that extra step is that the government isn't creating that $5,000. That $5,000 is coming from taxes that were already paid wastefully or fraudulently, however you want to find it, through what DOGE discovered. I believe they're referring to the
Right.
DOGE tax credit or whatever, however it's being named. But that's not $5,000 that's being reprinted or reborrowed or created out of thin air,
It
which
was
is what
our
we've
money
seen over the last
already.
several years. It was already in the system. It's
Right.
just being shifted from wasteful government spending back down to individuals. Hey, you use it to better your life. Could that have an inflationary effect? Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made there. I don't think that's an incorrect statement, but I don't think it hammers down the essence of what that is. And again, the difference, where I disagree is in the fact that where the money is coming from. It has
Right.
already been taxed and then is just being repurposed.
Yeah. Debt out of the 115 trillion. I would say, I don't know, I'm gonna take a guess of 30%.
Anyone else? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but so I'll answer it. 88%. 102 trillion of the
88%
88%.
of
So
our world economy is debt. Wow, that's an astonishing,
kind
kinda
of
scary, that's a
kind
scary
of
number.
yeah, makes you want to change your pants real quick, right? And
Yeah.
so and so this is when you hear us talk about gold, and one of the things that I've heard you say repeatedly, and because it's true, is that there is no debt behind gold and silver,
Right.
right? It is a tangible asset. You own it. That is the point of the precious metal investment. Is it makes you your own financial sovereign. It
Right.
detaches you from any one economic system. It puts you above any one economic system. And so
Correct.
when you start to understand that, debt again is a good thing. It's not all bad. And this kind of ties into why we got off the gold standard. And we talk to a lot of people all the time who say, "Oh, we need to get back on a gold standard." And I understand that perspective, but we can't. The flexibility, there is no flexibility with having that traditional gold standard. Now, I do think there is a world where there's some hybrid with some sort of reserves backed, and again,
Mhm.
it's going to involve Bitcoin and gold and all that. But the original gold standard has a Jekyll and Hyde nature to it. It allowed us to have a lot more flexibility, leverage, grow. A lot of people have benefited from it, but it also put us on a path of inevitable kind of implosion. And that's sort
Right.
of the name of the game. And so while things are moving appropriately, while the players within the game respect the underlying rules, then it's a good thing. And of course, over the last 4 years, I don't think the players have respected the rules. I think it's been from every angle, it's been over leveraged and stretched out. And when you realize how much of the world economy is debt driven, it's a scary thing. And I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think 88% sustainable.
No,
Um,
absolutely
I
not.
could be wrong,
Yeah. No,
right?
I agree with you.
But how is that fundament? How does that work in any sort of duration? And so when you start piecing these things together, it's a pretty scary conversation. So again, the importance of precious metals is you detach yourself from all that. All of a sudden, that debt doesn't matter to you. And when
Yeah.
when things hit the fan, not only are you
You're
protected, but
you're
that's when
okay.
it goes up. And of course, we've been in the bull run for the last year or so, and I think this bull run that we're in is simply a result of the previous administration's financial policies, right?
Absolutely.
And I'll say this administration has been mandated by the American public for systemic and radical change. And I believe he's going to do that. And I believe that's what we're going to see. And I will say one final time to our audience that the financial fallout from something that dramatic is going to be massive. You cannot avoid it. And so I'm looking for tangible assets.